Have you ever pondered what lies beyond the veil of death? The account I'm about to share with you will challenge every notion you hold dear. My name is Dr. Eduardo Ramirez, and for 2 decades, I was an atheist psychiatrist who scoffed at faith. Armed with scientific knowledge, I distanced hundreds from the concept of God. Then, something extraordinary occurred. I died, descended into hell, and interviewed damned souls. Their revelations chilled me to the bone. I once believed myself too astute to entertain ideas of God, heaven, or hell. For me, there was always a scientific explanation for everything. When patients recounted near-death experiences, I would patronizingly smile and dismiss their accounts as mere chemical reactions in the brain. It's not easy to hear what I'm about to tell you, yet it's essential. God has placed this testimony in your path for a reason. In my practice, I treated countless individuals suffering from depression, anxiety, and trauma. I prescribed medications, offered therapy, but never considered that what they truly needed was something deeper, something pills couldn't provide. I mocked believers when my colleagues referenced God or spoke of faith, countering with statistics and scientific studies. Religion, I proclaimed, was merely a coping mechanism for those unable to face the reality of non-existence after death. But in His infinite mercy, God chose to reveal the truth to me in a manner I could never forget, not through a book or sermon, but by leading me to the very place I denied existed: hell. Before we proceed, take a moment to contemplate what it would mean if everything you thought you knew about the afterlife was incorrect. What if there's more than what our instruments can measure, beyond what science can explain? The hours I spent in hell, speaking with lost souls, utterly transformed my perspective on life, death, and existence itself. Most importantly, it showed me that without Jesus, all our earthly wisdom is futile. This is not a tale meant to instill fear, though what you will hear is terrifying. It is a loving testament to the God who rescued a haughty atheist like myself and granted me a second chance, a chance I now share with you. Prepare yourself, for what you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about life after death. My life before this experience was what many would call successful. I graduated with honors from medical school, specialized in psychiatry, and opened a prestigious clinic. Patients referred by top hospitals filled my always packed schedule in a modern office adorned with degrees and accolades. I remember a patient named Maria who came to me after losing her son in an accident. Through tears, she spoke of a vision of her child in heaven, saying, "I know my son is with Jesus. I saw him in a dream so real and vivid." What did I do? I adjusted my glasses, took out my notepad, and began explaining how the brain creates such illusions to cope with trauma. I prescribed antidepressants and urged her to accept reality. Her son was gone, and there was nothing more. Every Sunday, while families attended church, I buried myself in scientific articles at my desk. My wife, though not sharing my atheism, learned to refrain from discussing faith at home. Eduardo once told me, "Sometimes there are things science cannot explain." I merely smirked and continued my work. At family gatherings, whenever someone mentioned God or offered a prayer before meals, I rolled my eyes in disdain. I considered myself superior, more enlightened than those who needed to believe in a higher power. Have you ever felt that way? Have you ever looked upon the faithful with a similar sense of superiority? Once, I was a skeptic, the kind who scoffed at the notion of unseen forces or divine intervention. I understood that intellectual pride can be a blinding cloak. One day, a pastor whose son battled schizophrenia visited my office not as a patient, but as a bearer of words that seemed to carry weight beyond his simple demeanor. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "Doctor, I know you don't believe this, but I'm praying for you." Inside, I chuckled, responding with a patronizing air, suggesting he should rather pray for his own son, who clearly was in need of real help. Religious conversions, I thought, were mere neuroscientific phenomena. My colleagues respected me, patients trusted me, and I lived under the illusion that I held all the answers. Yet, in truth, I was more adrift than those who sought my help. There was a night of no particular stress or event, a night that felt ordinary. Yet, as I sat at my desk, the words on my computer screen began to blur. An attempt to stand left me immobile, cold sweat beading on my forehead, and an elephant seemed to have settled on my chest. My wife, still awake, found me slumped over my desk. The last sound I registered was her frantic voice shouting into the phone, calling for an ambulance. "My husband is having a heart attack." My own cries were desperate as the paramedics arrived, what felt like an eternity later. As they wheeled me out, my mind, still sharp despite the failing body, diagnosed myself acute myocardial infarction. I wanted to shout for aspirin, nitroglycerin, but my voice was lost. In the ambulance, the medics worked with urgency around me, their muffled voices speaking of dropping blood pressure and racing heartbeats. We arrived at the hospital, a place I knew too well from my professional perch, but this time I was the one on the gurney. The harsh overhead lights flashed by as they rushed me to the emergency room. I was about to learn just how mistaken I had been. My heart stopped. The piercing beep of the heart monitor was a relentless soundtrack to the chaos. Voices shouted, "Fibrillating cardiac arrest shock now." The defibrillator's jolt coursed through me, my body arching involuntarily. But somehow, I wasn't there anymore. It was as if I was watching the scene unfold from above. I saw the doctors working on my lifeless form, nurses calling out instructions, the whole orchestrated dance of life and death. This experience, profound and humbling, stripped away my arrogance. It was a lesson that even the most learned among us can be students, that the heart knows truths the mind cannot yet comprehend, and that sometimes the things we dismiss as foolishness might just be the keys to understanding the deeper realities of our existence. It wasn't the peaceful darkness of sleep, nor the oblivion of fainting. It was deeper, more terrifying a descent that began in that precarious moment between life and death. Before I delve into what I witnessed, it's crucial you understand. What I'm about to share is no hallucination, no mere dream, and certainly not a byproduct of oxygen deprivation in the brain. I used to dismiss such notions myself. The initial sensation was one of falling, but not a typical stumble or faint. It was an endless plummet into utter darkness, the air growing heavier, hotter, making each breath a torment. At first, I tried to rationalize it all, just my brain shutting down, I told myself, mere chemical reactions. But then came odor smells so unique that no scientific explanation could suffice. The heat was unbearable, unlike any earthly warmth. It felt as though it scorched the very soul. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, though I wished they hadn't. What emerged from the shadows chilled me to the bone-flickering shapes on the walls, twisted forms watching me, and the sounds, distant screams, and heart-wrenching sobs that froze the blood in my veins. As a psychiatrist, my first instinct was to seek a logical explanation. Was I experiencing a psychosis induced by oxygen deprivation? This was akin to what my patients described during their hallucinations. Yet, deep within, I knew this was undeniably real. Barefoot, I began walking on what felt like embers, each step in agony, yet something urged me forward. There was no direction, no sense of time, only the horrifying feeling of being eternally lost. Then a voice pierced the chaos, not a cry of torment, but a clear voice calling my name. "Dr. Ramirez, you've finally arrived. Welcome to the place you've so often denied." I turned to see a figure in the darkness, not human, with a presence that exuded pure evil, leaving my scientific mind utterly speechless for the first time. "He wishes to conduct some interviews, Doctor," the figure said with a smile I'd never forget. After all, he always sought to understand near-death experiences. Now, he could study death itself. Brothers, if you're watching this and still doubt the existence of hell, take a moment. Can you imagine a place where every second is an eternity of torment, where the greatest pain is not physical, but the absolute certainty of being forever separated from God? The figure led me down what seemed an endless corridor, each side lined with what I can only describe as cells, each filled with tormented souls. The most terrifying thing wasn't their cries, but the clarity in their eyes. They were fully conscious, acutely aware of their location and their reasons for being there. Your patients are eager to see you, the figure said, especially those to whom you declared that God did not exist, that hell was merely a myth to frighten the weak. My heart, or what was left of it, sank as I realized the gravity of my past actions. Each denial of God's existence, each mockery of someone's faith had led souls to this eternal torment. If you're listening, whether a psychiatrist or a scientist, I urge you to consider, science does not explain everything. What I was about to witness would challenge all theories, studies, and rational explanations I had ever provided. The first soul I interviewed was that of a fellow doctor. I immediately recognized him, Dr. Martinez, a brilliant neurosurgeon who had died 3 years prior. He was in a solitary cell, his body covered in burns that never healed. Dr. Ramirez, he said with a voice barely recognizable, "Have you come to study hell, or do you finally admit we were wrong?" While wandering through the rows of cells, I noticed something profoundly unsettling. Time, as we understand it, had no meaning here. There was neither day nor night, and suffering was relentless, an unending cycle devoid of hope for cessation. The agony was a constant companion, eternal and unyielding. A soul from a nearby cell called out to me, reminding me of when someone had told me that my spiritual experiences were mere figments of my imagination. Now, I grasped the truth, but the realization came too late. A further revelation struck me like a bolt of lightning. All the theories I had developed regarding near-death experiences were baseless. They weren't hallucinations nor the byproducts of a dying brain. Instead, they were glimpses into a reality I had stubbornly refused to acknowledge. I saw the souls of renowned atheist scientists, prestigious academics, all of whom arrived here with their degrees and accolades only to find that none of it held any value. Irony dripped from the words of a soul that once belonged to a famous atheist writer. "We spent our lives searching for proof, demanding evidence of God's existence," the soul lamented. "And now we have all the evidence we desired, but it's too late to do anything about it." The most shocking revelation came when I stumbled upon a special section of hell, reserved for those who knew the truth but consciously rejected it. Their torment was greater because they had been given more light, explained a shadowy figure, indicating that it wasn't the ignorant, those who had never heard of God, who suffered this particular anguish. We influencers of thought, with our published theories and lectures denying the existence of God, with every patient we convinced that there was nothing beyond death, we're actually steering souls toward this eternal place of torment. Just when I thought I was destined to remain in that place forever, something extraordinary occurred. A light, so brilliant it caused all shadows to retreat, began to fill the dark space. The guiding figure recoiled, hissing like a wounded snake. The souls in the cells started screaming, some in terror, others pleading for mercy. It was as if the very core of hell quaked before this presence. "Eduardo," I heard a voice that pierced my being, unlike the other voices I had heard in hell. This one brought peace, love, and an authority that shook the foundations of that dreadful place. "It is not your time," the voice declared. "I've let you see this so that you may be a witness, that you may tell others what you have witnessed and warn them." The shadowy figure tried to intervene, insisting that I had denied God all my life and led others to this place. But the light intensified, and I felt myself being lifted from that place of torment. As I ascended, I could hear the cries of the souls, urging me to tell the truth, to warn them before it's too late. The ascent was as swift as the descent. Suddenly, I heard different voices, human voices. "He's coming back," they said. "We have a pulse." I opened my eyes in the operating room to find the doctors looking at me in astonishment. Later, they told me I had been technically dead for 20 minutes. There was no medical explanation for my return. "It's a miracle," one said, a nurse. For the first time in my life, I did not seek a scientific explanation. I knew exactly what had happened. Once stabilized and moved to intensive care, Tears streamed down my face, not tears of pain or fear, but tears of gratitude. God had given me a second chance, not just to live, but to rectify the harm I had caused. My life underwent a complete transformation after that experience. In my office, where once only diplomas and academic accolades hung, there is now a biblical verse: "I am the way, the truth, and the life." When patients inquire about this change, I share my testimony with them. Many of my colleagues thought my heart attack had affected my mind. "Eduardo has lost it," they said. Yet, I had never seen things so clearly. I began to study the Bible with the same dedication I once applied to psychiatric texts. I did not abandon medicine or psychiatry, but I practice them differently now. When a patient speaks about spiritual experiences, I listen with respect. When someone mentions visions or dreams about God, I no longer dismiss them. For years, I wept with joy when I saw myself kneeling in prayer for the first time. "God is faithful," he said amidst tears. Now, we pray together for every patient who comes to my office. Some of my former colleagues have harshly criticized me, but others have sought me out privately to ask about faith and spirituality. Brothers and sisters, if this testimony has touched your heart, I urge you not to make the same mistake I did. Don't wait until you have a near-death experience to believe. You don't need to see hell to know it's real. Today, every time I give a lecture, I don't just speak about psychiatry and medicine. I speak of a God who loves atheists so much that he is willing to take them to hell and bring them back, just so others might be saved through their testimony. True transformation is not about changing professions or abandoning science. It's about putting all our knowledge in the service of God, recognizing him as the author of all truth. Knowledge without his love and truth is worthless. Do not let intellectual pride lead you down the path I once walked. God is waiting to transform your life, just as he has transformed mine. May the Lord bless and keep you. And remember, the greatest science, the ultimate knowledge, is knowing Jesus.